So I guess just to do a little business here, just to get started, I do a weekly podcast with two podcast co-hosts who are unfortunately not here today with me. We do a podcast called the League of Geeks podcast, and in that podcast, we do a special segment called our Toybox, where we talk about toys, video games, comics, where we review toys that we got, toy news. We love adult collecting toys. I mean, and not only adult toys. I mean, I go back collecting toys for a long time, and not those kind of adult toys either. You know, are you sure? I heard you designed many of those toys. So tonight with me, I've got Ben Torres.
How's everyone?
Ben,
yeah. How was everyone?
Oh, perfect. And so it's rare. It happens a few times that we actually get to talk with somebody who has been in the business of designing toys, who's worked on some of my favorite toy lines growing up. So we've got Ben here, and Ben, I want to give you a few minutes to tell everybody about yourself and what you do.
Right now, I'm just. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Right now, I just finished a Marvel book, The Kingpin, which I have right here. Signed copy, I guess, for the raffle. Yeah. Just finished this earlier in the year. Apparently, it's doing well as a collected work. But before that, I spent 25 years designing toys for Hasbro. I was blessed to work on to be a designer on Star Wars and Pokemon and Batman, Superman, pretty much everything aside from Nerf. So that's the easiest way to say it. And I've been a designer on mostly everything aside from Barbie for various different companies. So the list is long, but I did that for a number of years. I transitioned it back into comic book work this past last year when Marvel contacted me out of the blue. So
that's great. So I mean, you brought it up, and Marvel that's my bread and butter. I love Marvel. I've read your Kingpin issues. They're fantastic. Fantastic work on the Kingpin. If you haven't checked out Kingpin, one of my favorite Marvel villains. It's a great book. Check it out. But I want to get into the toys here because this is a toy talk.
Sure.
And here's some of the stuff. I was gonna say,
yeah.
you remember these great yet awful at the same time sometimes, depending on how you look at them. Figures from the mid '90s, right?
This was. I didn't actually do these. These were by a third party that we, as on the Star Wars team, oversaw. So my hands weren't on here, aside from approvals.
Well, you approved them, though. No?
Had to.
So what goes into? So we talk about Star Wars. I think one of your first lines that you worked on was G.I. Joe, right?
Yes.
Was it the Extreme line?
Yes.
94, 93?
94.
So G.I. Joe Extreme line. So. Tell me a little bit about what goes into, I guess, designing a line or a specific figure. Like when you get that assignment, like, okay, we're looking at doing. I mean, G.I. Joe has been a huge brand from the '60s.
Yeah.
The '80s was my bread and butter with G.I. Joe, and
Yes.
then in the '90s, what goes into the design of that, and how do you come up with that kind of look and new feel, like bringing something old new again?
A lot. I mean, a lot. We have brainstorm meetings with as a team, and for me on G.I. Joe Extreme, 40%, about 60%, I should say, of the business were collectors, and we had to make some really tough decisions in terms of what we could do to reinvigorate the G.I. Joe line, because while G.I. Joe Extreme gets panned on a little bit, people forget that the actual real American Hero line. They were starting to do fantasy things that made absolutely no sense and was a disconnect from the actual G.I. Joe line. So I was commissioned. I had just started at Hasbro. I had been there for 4 hours when I was commissioned to redesign the entire G.I. Joe line.
That's great.
Yeah. And so...
welcome to corporate America,
yes,
right?
Yes. So I went back to my apartment. I was they had hired me, and I was in corporate housing. So I went back to my apartment. after being commissioned by the vice president of design, who is a genius. And I just sweated bullets, and looked at what was successful in G.I. Joe on the 3 3/4 inch line, and looked at some of the things that didn't work, and I made a decision to try to take it back to military, at the very least paramilitary. And so I sketched, 40 action figures conceptually. Had it ready by 9 o'clock the next morning. We had a big meeting. And when you have those meetings, what happens is you go into a room and you tack things on the wall even now. And the vice president and the senior art director, they just take a red marker and exit out, or I'm speaking figuratively, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah, I
they
get
just
it.
pull it off the wall. No, that's not good. No, that's not good. We like this. So they were able to pare down all those designs to about maybe 15. And
It's not a bad number.
yes, it's not bad. And then from there, once they pare it down, you then have to go back and create a bio for all of the characters.
Okay.
So then you create
the
bio.
back of the box little card that has like the bio thing. You're writing it all out. You're creating the story in your mind of what these guys are going through.
Yes. Yeah. So what a toy designer does when they're working on that kind of line, you're creating the characters. You're creating and sometimes you create the overall story arc for it. So with G.I. Joe Extreme, I created the characters. Everybody seems to love the Iron Claw, right?
Yeah.
I get a lot of emails about that, a lot of inboxes about that. I created him in like 5 minutes just to get it out the door. But it's one of my better designs.
That's great.
But you create the backstory, and then I just so happened to, at that time, Hasbro was doing something that's really that's commonplace now, where you create, and we have a franchise, where we have a brand like G.I. Joe, and then you create this big backstory so that it's sustainable in video games and movies and so on and so forth. So at that time, they had hired Dark Horse Comics to take the characters I created and create a story out of it. And I just happened to work with the wonderful gentleman, the late Roger Slifer. Roger was the creator of Lobo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Roger, really cool guy. And I was if you like X-Men from the 90s, worked with Will Mineo on the storyline and so on and so forth. So I was able to work with a lot of great people. And they came up with the story. We all came up with the story and the character backgrounds and the story arc and so on and so forth. So
that's great.
It's a really involved process, believe it or not.
That's great. So I'm gonna skip a little bit here.
Sure.
Because we got a short time span. We had
How long
a
do we
great.
have?
I think we got like 15, 20 minutes.
Okay,
left,
great.
Something like that.
Great.
So I want to talk about the Star Wars line because
Sure.
I know that's everybody knows Star Wars.
Yep.
I mean, we got some junky figures here, and there were some that came out in the 90s. Some I have. I still have. I have one in box because I love a few of the characters.
Yeah.
And my son has a ton of them still because he gets to destroy them. What was your favorite figure or action piece or vehicle or whatever that you worked on from that 90s line of Star Wars figures?
The Rancor monster from the Power of the Force.
Power Force Rancor?
Power of the Force. I designed most of the figures from Power of the Force. But the Rancor monster, I was able to convince management to allow me to design something new to have new tooling. So we designed a rotomolded Rancor monster, and that thing is my favorite, even though I never still have gotten a sample of it. But
Really? You don't have one?
I don't have a
Rob,
sample.
we need to get the Rancor out of your garage.
I had to buy one.
That is sad. That hurts. That hurts.
Yeah, but that's my favorite. My second favorite was there's this thing called there's a segment called Cinema Scenes.
Okay, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, I created that, and because we were just trying to figure out how do you leverage these figures even on a how do you get the most out of these figures that are going to be repeated? And so my idea was to come up with capturing scenes that are critical in the original trilogies. My favorite one was the bar scene with Ponda Baba, the walrus face guy, and the bartender.
Oh, that's a great one. They had a few of those,
Yep.
right? Didn't they do the Luke, Vader, and the Emperor back in the scene? I actually have that. I think I still have that in the box somewhere.
That one came out really nice. I like
Yeah. So which one in that Star Wars line is your least favorite that you worked on? That you go back and you're like, man, if only I did something different to it.
I did the Jabba the Hutt 2-pack.
Okay, so the one with the tail,
The one with the tail.
he's got it.
There were a lot of issues with that one. I wanted to do rotomolded, but I was overridden because they wanted to have the segmented, hard plastic thing. I wanted to rotomolded, and it was coming out with the time when Lucasfilm came out with the CGI versions when Han steps over his tail, and so they wanted something to reflect that. I hate it, still hate it to this day, because what we originally had was a lot better.
Can you tease a little bit about what you think? Well, what you originally had? Was it the?
Well, the original design was to use the Jabba from the original trilogy, not the CGI Jabba that they made us use. The eyes were too. It was disproportionate. It was just disproportionate.
Well, and they changed it again.
Then they changed it again. Yeah. Right. That the design and the look of what was given to us by Lucasfilm, and they do great work. They just missed the boat on that one. I would change that and the fact that it was hard plastic.
Nah, fair enough. I mean, I agree. It's ugly, man. I got it for my son because I knew he played it and it was cheap. I got it at a toy show and I was like, all right, here you go, you'll love it.
It's ugly, but people love it though, man. It's just not one of my favorites.
No, fair enough. So. You've also done a little. I've seen even on your Facebook page and stuff. You've done some like costume design work for movies, right?
Yeah.
Have you? I saw a piece you did. I believe it was the costume for Captain America.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you done any other work like that for any kind of?
Yep.
So what some of them have we been able to see any of them or?
Yeah. What Hasbro did in the '90s, there was a wonderful guy named Kevin Maurer. Like I said before, he's a genius. He was my vice president of design. Really intimidating guy because he's extremely talented. Just a brilliant guy. He had started this initiative where we would partner with movie studios so that we could look at the script and then introduce toy products within the story, within the movie, so that it doesn't seem like it's a toy commercial, but it seems like it's organic to the story.
Okay.
And so we did things like we worked on Men in Black, introduced a lot of toy concepts there. We Transformers, obviously, Star Wars. I believe the two-sided lightsaber was a result of one of our brainstorms. We provide a lot of world building for Lucasfilm, and we did all that. The way our relationship was, we did all that to give it to the art department so that we can have the master toy license. So it was essentially "quote unquote" free artwork, but it ensured us, the master toy license, which is worth billions.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. I mean, especially the double-sided lightsaber. I mean, is one of the most iconic things to come out of the
Who
original trilogy. Yeah.
Who knew? I remember when when it was posted on the wall. I can't remember who designed it, but I was thinking that's cool. That's very cool. And then he was only in it for the last act of the movie, 5 minutes.
And still the most iconic character out of the original trilogy.
Right.
So, all right. Well, with that, I mean, what is there a toy that you worked on that you worked hard, you put your blood, sweat, and tears in that never got out?
Oh, tons of them. Yeah.
What's your favorite out of those?
Tons of them. There was our second year for G.I. Joe Extreme. We wanted to go hardcore military because the collectors let us hear it because we took out the articulation. And back then was 5-point articulation, right? So my goal was to get back to maybe 7, 8, 9 points articulation.
Get a wrist or something going.
Something like that. And so I designed a character called the Silencer, and he was on the TV show, and he never saw the light of day. Never saw the light of day. But he was a hitman. Never saw the light of day. But the ones that I'm very proud of that did see the light of day, very, very proud of it, was, I don't know if you guys remember this toy line and TV show called Mummies Alive.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I created that literally from scratch.
Oh, wow.
The studio, I can't remember what studio it was. They came to us with an idea. I thought it was too similar to Gargoyles, the Disney show. And so we had some brainstorms, and then I just proceeded to work with a guy named Brian Lawrence and Chris Woods to create this thing called Mummies Alive. We then worked with Geekz Studios to produce the cartoon. So it was It was a good effort on everyone's part. The designs are just cool. They still hold up 20 years later.
Yeah, I think you can find some of those cartoons on YouTube if you haven't. Check those out because I remember that as a kid. It was a great show.
Thank you.
That was
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank
you. I'm impressed, man, that you did that.
The
from scratch.
writers, the writers were the writers from Big Top Pee Wee or Pee Wee Big Adventure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked with them. Worked with I don't know if Al Yankovic's song made it into the show, but they were going to use them as a theme song. Just wonderful people to work with, man.
Awesome.
Ivan Reitman produced it.
That's great. So, one thing I collect Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I collect. My room is 90% Marvel and then 10% Star Wars and maybe a 0.5% something else I find Transformers or something. But so in the Marvel toy lines, I've seen that you posted a lot of cool design. There was one thing I think it was like a Venom playset.
Oh yeah.
That I saw and I was just like, oh man, why couldn't I get that thing? What do you see in today's toy lines, especially like in Marvel? Let's just talk about Marvel. I'm not saying to bash or anything,
sure.
But that you wish that maybe you were given during the time you were working on that same kind of freedom, or like with the articulation you talked about, like you guys were doing 5 POA. Now you're getting figures in the 20, 30 articulation. You're getting different ball joints, swivel hips, all the different things that you never got.
I love the toys now because the all the articulation is just an afterthought now. Before it was a big deal. In the 90s, it was a huge deal because that's a lot of money for a tool. The only thing I would change about Marvel, I would stray away from the 3 3/4 inch figures because Hasbro does Marvel.
Yep.
So I worked on all the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie products.
I have them all.
Yeah.
All right, I had most of them. Yeah.
Well, and if you notice, the first generation, they were taller. They were bigger, and then we slowly shrunk it down.
No, they were because they were like full 6.5, and then even if you look at Spider-Man 3, I think it was like a 5.5 inch because they don't measure out the same scale.
Right.
It's like a Marvel Legends.
Scale.
Yeah.
You lose a lot of detail. especially when you have that much articulation. You just lose a lot of detail. But that's the only thing I would change. And maybe those 12-inch figures that they have.
The ones that they don't paint the backs too. Yeah, they have these great $10 12-inch figures. They're 5 points of articulation. You'll see them in the stores. They're like like a little slim box. And if you ever take one out, they don't paint the backs. Right. So it's like Spider-Man's got the red and the blue, and then the back is all red. Or Iron Man, the back is all red, and it's kinda, you don't even get the spider on the back. It's.
I would use a different plastic. I mean, if you're going to go that route, I would use a different plastic.
You know what? The toy line was in the 90s when they did the 12-inch, or like it was like a 10.5-inch figure. Those were actually kind of cool back then. I really like those. I actually want to go back and toy hunt getting those figures because they had all the different Spider-Man suits, a lot of the Marvel characters.
Yep.
So is there I know you're working on Kingpin now and you're doing some great work here with Marvel. Is there something else? Like what do you see for yourself as next? I mean, you've worked on toys. You've had your hand in some animation with helping with the lines and cartoons. Your comic book work. What do you want next? Like what do you think? What do you envision? Like do you want to be in movies, video games, anything? What's the next?
Being a designer, you can have your tentacles in a lot of things. So I've been blessed to have my tentacles in a lot of things. The only bucket list thing that I haven't done is do a Batman comic book.
Batman.
I worked on Batman for a long time. Worked on Spider-Man for a long time. But if I could do a Batman comic book, that would be a bucket list thing for me.
That's awesome. I mean, I can see it. I mean, you do some great work. I mean,
thank you.
It's awesome. So,
thank you.
Anybody in the audience have any questions they want to,
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 3 main action figures. Maybe you can explain to me why does the Marvel figures always have a point of articulation right in their gut? It just looks bizarre.
So the question is why the Marvel figures, currently the Marvel Legends figures, I believe you're talking about, right? I think some of the 3 3/4 inch have a chest articulation right down like in the stomach, like right below like where like your gut would be. There's like a piece that moves.
That is an engineering decision. That's just an engineering decision. That's a committee. Usually, when you see stuff like that, that's a decision by committee. That's a design by committee.
Is it supposed to be more structurally flexible because of the joint right there?
No, it's
terrible.
yeah.
I think some, when I see people, when we have a lot of listeners to our podcast who model toys and collect toys and everything, and they do a lot of posed figures, and I see that piece because they're able to do different body looks, look more up with their figure, like if they're doing some action piece scenes. Yeah. And I think that one might be it. So because you could bend them back and have them actually kind of looking up for posing, yes.
Yeah, that's
because a lot of those now, like a lot of these figures now, especially when you're looking at a $20 price point, they're made for the collector. You know, I'm not buying my son a $20 figure. I'm gonna buy him that $10 one with the back's not painted because he's gonna destroy it. Mine go on my shelf or in a glass case or whatever. So
yeah, there's a better. We did that before in the way back in the day. There's a better way to do it, but the way toys are designed now, you're not working hand in hand with the engineer. Like back in the day, I just would walk 2 doors down and talk to my engineer about how we could make it better and how we could make the transitions less drastic. But now you send a drawing over. And whoever in the China is the engineer, they'll just bang it out. Yeah, but no, I hear you. It works for Spider-Man. It doesn't work for everyone.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so you one of your earlier comic books was doing Night Watchmen.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you. There's one. Thank you.
Now that you've reached the big time of Marvel, you plan on staying with the big companies?
Well, I'm working with Roger McKenzie right now. Roger is the former writer of Daredevil. All that Netflix stuff Roger did. So that's where Netflix gets their source material from, is Roger. So if you go back and look at all the Frank Miller issues from the late 70s, early 80s, that was mostly Roger McKenzie. Frank Miller gets overcredited sometimes with that stuff. But it's mostly Roger for Charlton, Arrow, and our book that came out this weekend and is doing really well. I was stunned because there's some classic comic book artists on there, and the look and feel is classic comic book, like from the 80s. But it's doing really well. It's doing well. So yeah, we have some more stories in place that we'll be doing next year.
Awesome. Well, Ben, I think we're up on time. You want to let everybody know where they can follow you and
Oh, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at, BTD Design. I think so. And then and then on Facebook, www.facebook.com, Ben Torres Design.
And if you go to the League of Geeks, I'll have links for Ben and all everything you can find him, and some photos and stuff of his, because a lot of this stuff is really awesome. So definitely check it out. Check out Kingpin. The first trade came out, right?
Yeah, first trade came out. Yeah.
First trade came out. The issues are out at comic shops, and you can order them online or check them out digitally. But I prefer to have that paper in hand. So.
Yeah, me too.
So it was great. It was great. Thanks, Ben.
Oh, and this is straight from I didn't buy this.
All right, let's hear it for Alil and for Ben. Amazing. Thank you, Ben.